There we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Mental Health Monday here on Even Tacos Fall Apart. I am looking forward to tonight's conversation because it's something that we have talked about on this channel before, and we've talked about it with many different guests as far as things that have helped them. But now we're going to focus all about mindfulness tonight, which I think is going to be a really special thing. But I am joined today by Courtney Schulnick. She spent almost 20 years as a litigator at a big law firm in Philly, working in high pressure, high stakes environments where burnout was basically baked into the job. And along the way, she found mindfulness, and it ended up changing how she approached everything: work, life, stress, and even parenting. Courtney went on to train at Jefferson's Myrna Bryant Center for Mindfulness. I don't know why that was harder to say than it should have been. Where she now teaches mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR. She works with high-performing professionals, helping them stay focused, manage stress, and take care of their mental well-being without sacrificing their drive or ambition. She's also a mom of 3 boys and finds balance in the little everyday moments with her family. I am really excited to dive into mindfulness and how it can actually work in real, messy, demanding lives, because I think that's where we are. But before we dive in, I'm going to post these socials for Courtney so that you guys can connect with her. Feel free to pop over to any of these and make sure that you say hey whenever you're there. And I see a couple folks in chat. If you have any questions tonight about mindfulness, we do have a question queue open. Feel free to pop those into the chat, and we will make sure to address your questions while we are live. So feel free to pop those in, and thank you just for being here today. And Courtney, thank you so much for taking the time out to have this conversation.
It's my joy to be here, and I'm thinking to myself, saying to myself, is nothing else. I'm being entertained by your cat who's trying to get your attention and literally just hit your face like, look at me, mama,
Yes.
Pay attention to me.
Yes, Tyrion is always ready for some attention, for sure. And
I see that.
He does that during the day whenever I work, because I work from home also, and he'll come over when I'm on a conference call or something and just get up in my face. When he was smaller, he would sit on my shoulder. He really wants to be on you. But now I've got a little see, he's trying to do it now. But so I've got a cat condo over here. Yeah, they really do. Got a little cat condo over here so that he can sit next to me. I'm like, you can't be on me, but you can sit next to me and I'll pet you for sure.
Sweet.
Most definitely. Joey B, hello, welcome. I hope that you are having a great night. Feel free to ask any questions while we are here live today. So Courtney, can you share a little bit about what led you to focus so deeply on mindfulness in your work?
Sure. So as you shared with our audience, I spent 20 years, just about 20 years, working as a litigator. And working as a litigator or working as an attorney is a very demanding job. It's inherently stressful, at least in my experience from the type of litigation I was handling. There is a lot of high pressure moments, and it was manageable to a certain extent with one child. And then you mix having multiple children, which in and of itself is a demand. It's a job.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite jobs, but a demanding one for sure. And you try to balance that in with the demands of being a litigator. In Philadelphia, I don't know how it is where you are, but we have trials where we'll get 24-hour notice, and you may have a case where you have medical experts, you have multiple witnesses, and you have to be ready to, if you get the phone call at 4:30 on a Monday and the court says you're starting trial tomorrow, it can turn your whole world upside down. So it's not, at least in my experience, it wasn't like I just had my life to live and not other people, human beings to consider. So I was able to manage the stress levels associated with litigation pretty well, and with having one child. Fast forward to when my husband and I decided that we wanted to expand our family. I hit some fertility challenges in between son number 1 and son number 2. I now have, as you mentioned, 3 sons, but I had some some hurdles in between our first and second son. And throughout it all, I just kept pushing through. I didn't want to mess anything up, up at work. I was a younger associate, really trying to prove myself. I was only with the firm for a few years at the time when I had my first son. And I didn't want them to perceive me as not being invested in my work. I very much knew that it wasn't an option, even if I didn't want to. Financially, we both, my husband and I both contribute a substantial amount to our income. And so I knew that I wanted to continue working, but I was afraid of how it would look. And I didn't want to miss time away in having to go to doctor's appointments. So I kept everything very hush hush. And deep down, with the multiple losses that I experienced, I just had this grinded out mindset where you just have to keep pushing through. So that's what I did. And I did a great job. I was winning cases. I was getting great outcomes in arbitration hearings and writing wonderful briefs. But deep down, I was really struggling. I wasn't giving myself the time to slow down and process what was happening in my personal life. And I wasn't able to recognize that I was basically running on fumes. And eventually, I was diagnosed with a condition where my own body was an issue, where an autoimmune condition that was only triggered during pregnancies. And I learned after having multiple miscarriages that I had this condition. And so once we figured that out, we were able to keep the pregnancy of my now second son. So that was incredible. But when he was born, he didn't sleep for I think the first year, a full night.
Oh no.
And so here I was. Yeah, I had a toddler. I had a newborn. I was managing a full caseload, working really long hours. There were a lot of unknown pieces, like I was saying, just it's the nature of the work that I was doing. And I wasn't happy with the way I was feeling. When I was at home with the kids, which I loved being home with them, I was a nervous wreck that I was going to let something fall through the cracks at work. I couldn't really take in those moments of joy because I was so afraid that, oh my gosh, I have to be on. I'm forgetting something, or I should be billing. I was working as a defense litigator, and we would bill our time. So you very much were of the mindset where time not spent doing or working on a case was time wasted.
Yeah.
So at least I was of that mindset. So yeah, when I was at home, I wasn't fully present for my children. I was worrying about what was to come. And then on the flip side, when I was in the office, I was feeling terrible for not being present for my children, not being patient with my husband. Or I was noticing, or I should say, and I was noticing that I was really judgmental of myself. I didn't feel like I was a good enough mom, a good enough wife, good enough attorney. So it really caused my stress and anxiety that had been there to escalate to the point where I would come into the office and just walking into the building, I would feel triggered. So I was treating with a therapist for several years to better manage stress and anxiety that was largely fueled by the work I was doing. And she said, "Have you ever heard of mindfulness?" And I at that time, I had it. This was probably 11, 12 years ago. I hadn't heard of it. When I heard her talk about what mindfulness is, I said, "Oh my gosh, this sounds like everything I need, that I want." So she told me about the foundational program, the 8-week program known as the Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction Program, or MBSR program. And when she when she told me about two, at the time I was living in Philadelphia, so there were two main places you could take it. One was at Jefferson, the Center for Mindfulness. The other one was up at Penn. I was living closer to Jefferson's location, and it was on my way home from work.
Mm.
So I figured, oh, you know what? It was offered at nighttime, so it was 6:30 to 9 o'clock in person. This is pre-pandemic, and so it was 2.5 hours once a week for 8 consecutive weeks. I saw that on top of the in-person classes, there was home practice that was like 30, 40 minutes. I said, no way. I'm barely able to make ends meet with
Right.
holding a full-time job and caring for 2 children. So I put it off, and I was still very curious about what mindfulness was, and I bought some self-help books and I researched a bit on it. And one of the books gave you like exercises and different meditations you can listen to. But if something came up in my day, it would get pushed to the wayside, and days would go by and I wouldn't practice. So I just increasingly felt more overwhelmed, both in my personal and professional life, to the point where I realized this isn't really a way to live. I wasn't happy. I was getting, I had some health issues, and I had so much goodness in my life, but I wasn't able to appreciate it. So I decided that if nothing else, I wanted to do something to help myself for my family, and I wanted to feel better. So I decided to enroll in the MBSR program. It was this cycle now. It was offered in April. It was about 10 years ago, and it was a game changer. It was probably about 3 weeks into the program that I started to notice a slight shift in how I was feeling. And all of the stressors, all the demands of being a mom, the stressors from the cases I was handling, whatever else was going on in my, with family and friends and whatnot, the world, everything was still very much there. But the program helped me to understand how I was relating to the stressors in my life and the ways in which I actually caused myself more suffering. And the ability to see that was the greatest gift, because once we can become more aware of some of our habits and patterns that really don't serve us, then there comes a sense of agency and choice so that we can actually choose healthier ways to relate to what can be really stressful and challenging. And we can learn ways to give ourselves permission to rest and to really appreciate the goodness that is here, that in many of our lives, in just the pace of which life moves, despite whether or not it's, we're working or not working, it can cause us to miss out on many of the moments of our lives. So really the nature of my work and what I was experiencing as a litigator became my path to mindfulness. And it's been a beautiful sort of circular path, in that the practices and tools that I learned through the mindfulness program and through deepening my understanding and my personal practice, it's allowed me, it bought me another 10 years of working as a litigator and actually enjoying the work and doing better work, because I was able to focus and be present and find more balance. So it's just been a beautiful sort of organic evolution, and now I teach the MBSR program, and I bring these resources into the legal community to help support other legal professionals who are struggling with stress, anxiety, depression, but not just in the legal sector. Really, any professional who's working in a high stakes profession or any individual, whether you're working or not, these are really incredible tools that can help us to really show up for the moments of our lives.
Yeah, I love that you've taken it from this is something I struggled with, and now I'm going to help other people who are struggling with the same thing in the same field
Mhm.
and other fields as
Yeah.
well. But just to take it.
Yeah.
And you talked about it being 11, 12 years ago, and I just want to put that into perspective because 11, 12 years ago was when I was going through postpartum depression, and it was not talked about yet. Like now it's so you're so much more open about everything. You can
Yeah.
find things online that you couldn't find back then. You know, you talked about the
Yeah.
self-help books. Like now you can just look things up online and find information from credible sources and everything. You couldn't do that back then. And it's one of those things.
Yeah.
It's like the amount that it's changed, the distance that we've gone since back then, it has really just astounded me whenever I think back about my own journey. And it sounds like
Yeah.
it could be the same for mindfulness as well.
Yeah, I think starting conversations, even I feel like fertility issues, there wasn't
Mm-hmm.
as much of a discussion. It was more hush hush. I know in my experience, I took good care of myself. I practiced yoga to, optimize my health, my mental health, my physical health. I did all the things. And so I felt like, where am I going wrong? And sometimes there's only so much that we can control.
Mm-hmm.
So the conversation around mental health conditions and other physical conditions, I think, is what helps us to heal and to learn and to grow. But until that conversation really deepens and grows, it can leave us feeling very alone. And when we feel alone and trapped, it sort of builds a wall in
Mm-hmm.
our ability to feel better and to connect with others.
Yeah, yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
Couple of things from the chat. Rose has a question and a comment. I'll read her comment first because I love it. She says, "By the way, y'all both look amazing today. Thank you."
Aw, thank you. And
That's very
I
sweet.
have to say, if my third son was a girl, Rose was the name that we were going to pick
Oh, I
for our
love
daughter.
that.
But yeah, I love
Now,
the
did
name.
y'all
I had a
know
great
like ahead
time
of
with her.
time what you were gonna have, or did you leave it a
No,
surprise?
it was a surprise.
I
Yeah,
couldn't
but
do
I was
that.
so
I had to
convinced
know.
that I was having a little. Yeah, I thought it was exciting not to know, but I'm very much a planner in every other aspect, but with
Yeah,
this I didn't. But I love the name Rose, so I just
yeah,
had to put that out there.
that's great. And then Rose's question today was: do you crochet or knit, or does someone in your family do one or both? And if not, does anyone do any crafts in your family?
Oh, this question just gave me goosebumps. Okay, so I just mentioned right before you shared Rose's question that the reason I was going to choose I didn't go into depth, but my great grandmother's name was Rose.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of knitting, she was an avid knitter. So I did learn how to knit. I did not perfect it. I would be embarrassed to show you I what I created, but I still have a little knitting bag and all of the materials that were hers that I saved, and it's just like the most sweet keepsake of mine. But I am creative. I love art. I minored. I think the second part of that was it the question
Other crafts?
creativity?
Yeah, yeah.
Other crafts. Okay. So I love to draw. I used to sketch ever since I was a little girl, these embellished stick figures. I would be in class, and if I knew a friend was hurting or maybe they were down about something, I used to like take a piece of notebook paper, fold it in half and fold it again so it would be like a little card. And I drew these embellished stick figures and would put just like a cute little like minimal copy and
Mm-hmm.
write something the middle. But you can actually I started a greeting card line when I was pregnant with my first son called Adventures of Little C, and it's on Etsy. So if you want to see my craft side, you can check out my greeting card line, Adventures of Little C. And then I was a photo minor in college. I I contemplated going to law school, but I have such a passion for arts that I was torn. between going to law school and pursuing something that I really enjoyed. So I worked as a photo assistant in New York City I was taking photographs of shoes all day long for Bloomingdale's catalog.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, I mean, I enjoyed like I enjoyed again. For those of you who are listening, I grew up in Philadelphia, and there's a famous park in the middle of Philadelphia called Rittenhouse Square Park, and I would often go there. I love shooting children, so I had I'm gonna show my age here, but before digital was such a big thing, I had a Nikon camera that used film, and I would shoot with black and white, and had a dark room, and so yes, I love crafts, I love art, and it's something that in my spare time I like to practice.
I love that. That's awesome. And what a cool connection to the name and the
I
craft.
know.
And that's
No,
neat.
literally, I
That's
got
great.
goosebumps as soon as you shared her question. Yeah.
Yeah. And then a couple of comments from the YouTube side as well. Joey B says, sometimes I can't pay attention. Sometimes I can't pay attention because I don't always know what to do because I always have a headache. What would you recommend? And I'll start
Mm,
the answer to that one because for sure talk to your doctor. Like that's the very first thing that
mm.
I would do. Make sure there's not something deeper going on that you need to have addressed. But when it comes to mindfulness, Courtney, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah. So two things stood out to me about what you shared by Joey B, right?
Yep.
So I heard you say that he said that he can't pay attention. And the second part I heard you say is that he always has a headache.
Hmm.
And so when we sort of box ourselves up as if we can't do something, like it's a hard no, we put ourselves in this box as we're just not cut out for something, or we're not right for this, or we do this wrong. When we box ourselves up like that, then we believe it. We actually become what it is we're boxing ourselves up as. So I would be curious about the way you sort of that inner critic or that inner voice that's telling you you can't focus, and to be curious about, again, I heard you say about the headache. So there may, as you're sharing, Mama, it's important to consult with a physician. I'm not a physician, but to just be curious about you're telling yourself that you can't. I will acknowledge that we are conditioned, I think, now more than ever to be doing and to
Yeah.
be multitasking. And as human beings, we're really not designed to function in that way. So it makes it really difficult at times to pay attention or to focus on any one task at hand. So again, noticing the telling yourself, I can't. And something that may be really supportive is to just take a moment. Like if you want to in this moment, Joey, you can just invite attention to come into the body. So not having to figure anything out, not having to sort of get caught in thinking or resolving or even having to figure out how to focus, but just dropping attention, inviting attention to come into the body. And I don't know what posture you're in, if you're standing, if you're moving, if you're sitting, but actually feel what it feels like to be within a body. So if you're sitting like I am in an upright posture, maybe just bringing a sense of curiosity into the sensation of feeling the backs of the thighs, the buttocks making contact with the seat. Maybe you're noticing the soles of the feet making contact with the ground. And then seeing if you can just gather attention a bit more to come into the body and feeling the body breathing. So again, not having to figure anything out, not having to breathe a certain way or change the way you're breathing, but just maybe sensing the breath in the region of the belly or the region of the chest, noticing the natural rising and falling with each in breath, each out breath. And then I'm just going to invite you, Joe, if you've been practicing or listening to what it is I'm suggesting, to just notice how you are and see if in that minute or two in which I was guiding a short, informal sort of meditation, if you were able to just rest attention on the body, the regions of the body making contact with the chair, the sense of the body breathing, and knowing that that's the ability to focus. That's your ability to direct attention where you'd like for it to go. And we all have that agency. We all have that power. But in all of the busyness of our lives and the doing, we kind of just fall into autopilot that we're not even aware of what it is we're doing. But when we take moments to just notice, again, not judging ourselves, and we invite attention to come into the body, sometimes that can support us in focusing attention where we'd like for it to go. And then I think the other question, or the other layer to that, was about headaches. Again, when we tell ourselves that we always have a headache, and again, I'm not saying this may be the case for you. There may be a physical condition, something going on that is causing that, but I can speak from personal experience. I tend to hold a lot of tension in the left side of my body, specifically like the neck, shoulder area. And in those moments, or sometimes it's those days when I'm noticing strong sensation, I will tell myself, oh, I have a bad shoulder, I have a bad neck, or my neck is always tight, or my shoulder is always stiff. That, again, it's not necessarily accurate, but when we're experiencing strong sensation that is not comfortable, that is not something that feels like ease, we have a tendency to tell ourselves it's always this way. But the truth is that everything is impermanent and everything is constantly changing. So it can be really helpful for us to recognize how it is we're relating to what we may associate as pain or strong sensation or discomfort, and careful about how we label it, what we're telling ourselves. And when we can notice that and just bring a sense, again, being curious of what's here in this moment and open to the actual sensation rather than the story we tell ourselves, you may notice a slight shift. So just a suggestion, but again, as Mama suggested, to consult with a physician about that.
Yeah, I love that just kind of the body scan piece of that, because there's plenty going on in your body. Like there will be some days where I'm just like at my max irritation level, and I do have to stop myself and be like, what is going on? Why am I feeling like, it's not that something has happened. It's like, why am I feeling this way? And if I do, kind of very similar to what you're talking about, just like, okay, how am I feeling in this part of my body? How am I feeling in that part of my body? It's like, oh, you've been sitting like a goblin for 2 hours. That's why you're irritated. Or when's the last time you had a drink? Your throat is so dry. Right. Just kind of like trying to bring awareness to the parts of your body without those assumptions can be really difficult to get used to, but it is extremely helpful once you do get used to it. For sure. At least for me.
I love that you're giving that a voice, and just noticing how hard we can be on ourselves, and not giving ourselves a hard time when things aren't exactly how we'd like for them to be.
Yeah. Okay, one more question in from YouTube. Hero Jones says, hello, what age do you guys remember life from? I'm not sure that that's necessarily related to mindfulness, but I love the question in general. And I don't remember. So I go back and forth with myself. Do I have these specific memories, or have these stories been told to me so much that I think I remember them? So my first actual, like, I know for sure that is a memory of mine, was when I was about 4 or 5, and it was related to my dog and my sister and what we were doing in the backyard, just kind of playing together, and extraordinarily muddy. and it was just like that. It was just a moment of like, this is so much fun. I'm really enjoying this. It wasn't anything special. We did it all the time, but that's probably my first memory. So around 4 or 5, not super early. But I've been told stories from when I was like 2 so much that I swear I remember them.
Or like if you're shown photographs, right, from and told the stories with the
Yeah.
photographs. Like, oh yeah, I do remember that, but
Mhm.
it's like, do I? And that's an interesting question. I was actually just talking with a therapist. She was on my podcast, and she deals with a lot of familiar trauma from from
Mm.
families, like from when she goes back to when you were in the womb, and how that really shapes who we are today, like years beyond. And I was asking her, I have this memory of being cared for. I was premature,
Mm.
but I also had tubes in my ears when I was older, obviously. And so I don't know. I said, is it possible that what I'm remembering goes back to when I was born? Can anyone even remember that? And I don't think I think I think was her answer. I think it was like a possibility, but
Mhm.
I think what I'm probably recalling is when I was 3 or 4, similar to when you recall something, and I had to have a procedure done for my ears, and I just remember uh, the bits and pieces of like going, coming. So
Yeah.
that's yeah. I would say yeah, 3 or 4
Mhm. Yeah.
years old.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. Hero, I would love to know what age you remember life from. So that's a great question. It's really fascinating. And then just to follow, Rose says, I do a lot of crafts. My favorite besides crochet is wood burning. That's really cool.
Ooh, yeah.
That's
Very cool.
I don't have the equipment for that one, but I would totally do that one if I did.
Yeah, I don't have the equipment either, and I don't know that I would trust myself. I don't
Well,
know how to do it, but
I like to burn things, so I'm sure it'll be
guess I
good.
could learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a true crime story that fascinates you?
So this is an interesting question, and one that I think I have to think about. So I don't watch a lot of TV, and I'm definitely not one who likes to watch mysteries or crime stories before bed. I know
Yeah.
that sometimes my parents used to watch like those 2020 episodes, and I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna have bad dreams now from watching that. But something that I am fascinated by, not proud of, but involves a crime, is something that I committed as a young girl. As a 5-year-old, I, for whatever reason, I like stealing candy bars. I would go to the store, and this is so random, but this is what came to mind. But I'm the most honest person now, and for most of my life that I can remember. But I love Snickers bars as a child, and it wasn't like my family wasn't able to afford a Snickers bar. So sometimes I just wonder, like, what was going on there? Why did I do that?
Hmm.
And I've never stolen anything else. But as a child, there was some satisfaction not in not paying and taking Snickers bars. So my parents have told me stories where they've found out in the midst of it and have made me return it. And then there have been other times where they would just find me at home with an empty Snickers wrapper. So it fascinates me. I don't understand it because it doesn't really fit into who I believe I am, but it nonetheless is something that I did as a young child.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's all
Yeah.
kinds of things that I guess that could be driven by, but I mean,
Yeah.
Snickers are
Maybe
great.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe I know as a kid, I don't like them now, but I like jelly beans a lot. And maybe I just thought like I maxed out. If my parents knew, if I asked them for the Snickers bar, they would say no, you had too many jelly beans. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, so that's probably the most fascinating, but something I'm not proud of.
Yeah, yeah, understandably. So,
Yeah.
getting to kind of the root of our topic tonight, how is mindfulness different from things like traditional therapy or meditation?
Yeah, this is a great question, and one that I like to distinguish because mindfulness is innate. It is something that we can informally weave into our lives. So our ability, and just for those of you who are new to mindfulness, mindfulness, what it is present moment awareness. So it's the ability to know at any given moment what's happening. And We don't have to be in lotus pose. We don't have to be in formal meditation to be aware. We can be aware of our cat being next to us and petting the cat. We can be aware as we're walking our dog, brushing our teeth, washing our hands. So mindfulness is the awareness piece. Meditation or mindfulness meditation is a formal practice that allows us to strengthen the muscle of the mind so that when we are disconnected, when we're worrying about the future or we're dwelling on the past, we're more easily able to notice that the mind has drifted off or that we're judging the present moment. So the formal practice of mindfulness strengthens our ability to pay attention in the present moment. And the way I look at mindfulness as being different, again, some other practitioners may distinguish this in another way, but in my experience, traditional therapy, sometimes we go to a therapist because we feel like we have to fix ourselves. Like I have an ongoing joke with my brother, and we say, like, I'm getting I won't say the word, but like we feel like we're messed up, I won't use the profanity, but
You can if you want. It's fine.
I think the audience catches the drift,
yeah.
but it's just basically like we feel like there's something wrong with us that we need to fix or we need to improve or better ourselves.
Yeah.
Whereas with mindfulness, we can appreciate that we are already complete and whole just as we are. That no matter, I'm gonna share with you. So John Kabat-Zinn, who created the MBSR program, there's a quote he shares that he says, and it's no matter how many things are wrong with us or what we feel is wrong with us, as long as we're breathing, there's more right than there is wrong. And so I love that because it takes away the I want to say the effort to feel as if we have to in some way improve ourselves, and to know that in this moment we are whole and complete just as we are. That's not to say that there aren't areas, as I mentioned like earlier, we may have habits that aren't serving us anymore. It doesn't mean that we just keep following or living in that way. We could find ways that are more nourishing, but it's not about having to fix ourselves. And so my association, at least with traditional therapy, has been like, we need to somehow get rid of something or improve ourselves in some way to be a better version of ourselves.
The comparison to fixing versus observing is great. I haven't heard it put that way before. Of just because you go to therapy generally because you feel like there is something to fix. But that mindfulness piece is very much the, like, no, we were talking about the body scan earlier. Like, it is just how are things in yourself right now? And that's a great distinction.
This is but I'm all for therapy.
Absolutely.
I treated with a therapist for years. I'm not anti. Just the way I see, I think mindfulness can complement working with a therapist in many ways, and vice versa. But that's sort of the way I see the two distinguished from one another.
Yeah, my therapist is where I got the body scanning from. Like that, I think they very much go hand in hand. And a lot of the time, if you're working with a therapist and that mindfulness is something that they think is going to help you, they'll suggest specific practices for you and everything. But you can have one without the other. You can do traditional therapy without mindfulness necessarily. You can practice mindfulness without necessarily going to traditional therapy. So,
right.
What's the science behind mindfulness? Does it really help for things like anxiety or ADHD or panic disorder?
Yes, and there is increasingly so. There are science-backed research studies that show that mindfulness can help with reducing stress, anxiety, depression. because I work with a lot of attorneys and people who work in high stress environments, there have been multiple studies within the legal field alone where there have been versions of the MBSR program, so not even as extensive, like 2.5 hours for 8 weeks, but it would be like a more consolidated program, a 6-week program where attendees meet for an hour or for 6 consecutive weeks. And studies show that in that short amount of time, that there has been a significant decrease in stress and anxiety, and you can enhance focus. And as I mentioned, find more joy in the work that you do. And what's really so cool is there is a growth in a specific area of mindfulness. It's showing it's the intersection between mindfulness and neuroscience. And it's so fascinating because we are able to see, well, I'm saying we, but there is research that's being conducted that shows the benefits of mindfulness in ways in which scientists can actually measure. One example, a quick study I'll tell you about is John Kabat-Zinn, who I mentioned earlier. He collaborated with a psychologist, some of you may know of him, Richie Davidson, at the University of Wisconsin. And they offered a workplace mindfulness program where there were people who were working in really high stress jobs. And they participated in a mindfulness study where some of them, there was a control group and a test group where they had a brain electrical, a study with brain scans before the program began. And then they had a brain scan done at the end of the program, and then 4 months later. And in addition, both groups were given the influenza vaccination at the end of the program. And what the findings showed is the real efficacy of mindfulness, that even in a short amount of time of practicing mindfulness, that it helped the region of our brains that are responsible for positive outlook. It increased the activity. And the group who, I should add, of the two groups, the test group, they were the meditators, and the other group did not learn meditation. But in the group that meditated, there was a significant amount of increase in activity in the region of the brain that's responsible for positive outlook. And in those who meditated, between those who, all of them received the flu vaccination, but those who meditated were shown to produce more antibodies. So the study was like a landmark study in showing that we can promote more positivity both in immune function and brain function with meditation. And I don't know if you know, if you're familiar with neuroplasticity, but we could actually use our minds to change our brains. So that was an amazing study, and it's relatively new in the whole scheme of things, but it's very promising for convincing the skeptics out there that this isn't just like woo-woo, it's not a band-aid, but there's scientific research that really backs the benefits of mindfulness.
That's really neat. And it sounds like it can be pretty quick too, as far as seeing the benefits of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't, you don't have to meditate for hours on end and for years, even in just a 6-week program, practicing for just a few minutes a day, you can notice real benefit.
Yeah, that's really neat.
Yeah.
Is there ever a time where mindfulness could be harmful? Maybe if someone has trauma or something like that?
Yeah, that's another great question. So in the MBSR program, when people register to take the program, we go through and we meet with each individual to question them about whether they have experienced any trauma in their lives. Because mindfulness is a little bit different than what some of us are used to.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, we turn away from what doesn't feel good or what is emotionally or physically challenging. And with mindfulness, we're actually learning to turn towards what can feel really challenging or what is challenging with a light touch of mindfulness. So being gentle, being curious, kind towards ourselves. But we want to know if anybody has had past history of trauma, because if they can experience a trigger in some way with the practice. So we often ask, are you treating with a therapist? Are they aware that you're taking this program? And we just want to make sure that there's a clear line of communication and make them aware that if they notice strong emotions coming up for them, that it is common, but to be open with us so that we can support them, but to also, if they're working with a mental health practitioner, that they're aware of it as well.
Yeah. Is there a time where, whenever you're doing this intake process, if someone says like, yes, I have this history, no, I'm not working with a therapist, is there a time where you would say like, go talk to a therapist first and then let's figure this out?
Yeah, it depends on where they are. Like if they're struggling with depression and they're in such a state where we don't feel that this is safe for them to partake in at that moment, we may suggest we would let them know of our concerns. And it can be very beneficial, but we want to make sure that we're skillful. As again, I'm not a doctor, and while I'm trained mindfulness teacher, we want to be careful that nobody gets re-triggered by these practices. So yeah, we do screen and make sure that people who do want to take the program, that it's the right time in their life to take the program.
Yeah. When you first started practicing mindfulness, I know you mentioned earlier that it was kind of like this push and pull for you. So what did that look like for you day to day?
Yeah, so I'd say I'm a very diligent student. If I'm in a class forever since kindergarten, if the teacher says you have to do X, Y, and Z, I'll do X, Y, and Z, and then if there's any such thing as another letter after Z, I would do like whatever comes out. I really am very dedicated. So I followed the curriculum pretty seriously. I was at such a point in my life that I wanted to be committed to feeling better and doing whatever it took. So what that looked like for me when I was in the MBSR program is, as I mentioned, I attended each session for 8 consecutive weeks, 2.5 hours in person. And then there's what's known as home practice, and that would consist of typically listening to each day. So, for example, if the class was held on Monday evenings, then Tuesday through Sunday, you're encouraged to listen to a recorded guided meditation. So you mentioned body scan. Typically, or part of the curriculum, week 1 of the MBSR program, you learn the body scan. So home practice would be for week 1 to listen to about a 30-minute a recorded 30-minute guided practice. So I would do that each morning. Sometimes, depending on, life happens. I know you have children, and I have at the time when I took the program, I had 2. And so you have a sick child who comes into your bed early in the morning when you set your alarm for like 5 o'clock when you think the world's going to be sleeping and quiet, that goes out the window. So on those days when I didn't have time carved out to do the formal practice, I would have a sign on my door in the office, because we didn't have locks on our office doors. And I would put a sign up on the door saying, please do not disturb meditation and practice. And so I would weave it into my day. I was very dedicated to making sure that each day I had that formal time to practice. But I was also informally, as the program went on, I started to informally weave it into my life. So whether it was the way I was communicating with someone, whether it was a client or a family member, or just, when I was sort of caught in some virtual world of thought, I would notice that and come back to the present moment. So it was very much like at first the home practice, which was listening to the guided meditations. Sometimes there were handouts, but as the program proceeded and my practice deepened, it became more of a way of life where it just was woven into my daily routine.
Yeah. Did most people respect the
Yeah.
sign on your office door?
Yes and no. I would say some of the younger associates were more curious. Some of the old school, the more senior partners just thought I was some hippy dippy, like, sitting in lotus pose.
Mhm.
I think my boss at the time was like, "Are you growing hair under your armpits? And are you wearing peace signs?" He was like very old school mentality. And I said, "No, no, 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 that's not what's going on in here." But there were definitely some comments that they were made, but for the most part, people respected it, and I caught the attention of a lot of people to the point where there was so much curiosity that they invited me to give a presentation on it, and
Ah,
that's pretty much
cool.
what
Yeah.
encouraged to transition at this. Well, that's what encouraged me to start speaking about it and sharing it in the legal community. So I'm grateful for that sign and for that interest that I sparked with it.
Yeah, it's really neat that it was like there's too many people asking too many questions. Can you just talk to us about it? Like
Yeah,
that's awesome.
what is this? Yeah, see what I was doing. So just like, "Can you just tell us, show us what this is?" And
Yeah,
it was well received. Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah.
That's really neat. Is there
Yeah.
anything you wish more people understood about mindfulness or MBSR?
Yeah. I think that so there's two pieces coming to mind. One, I think there's a huge misconception that you have to be a certain type of person to practice.
Mm.
I will say mindfulness is not for everyone, and it's not to say all be all, but it it's often perceived as if like you need to clear your mind or get rid of your thoughts in order to practice mindfulness, and that is not what mindfulness is about. Mindfulness is actually becoming more intimate with your thoughts and noticing your thinking patterns and how pushed and pulled we can get by our thoughts. So it's not having to get rid of our thoughts or clear our minds. We can get more clarity by practicing mindfulness, but we the way we can deepen our ability to focus moment to moment is just by understanding how our mind works.
Mm.
And the more we can understand that, the more we can work with our mind. So yeah, just not thinking that you're not cut out for it because you can't get rid of all your thoughts or your mind's too busy or you're always going. And the other one is the time component. I admit I got spooked out by the demands of the MBSR program,
Mhm.
but not all mindfulness programs are like that. You can still learn mindfulness, the formal practice of mindfulness in with small moments. And we say small glimpses many times can really lead to impactful transformation. So people get spooked by, thinking that they're too busy, their lives are too full, and why there is some validity to like the MBSR program that you have to be willing to commit a certain amount of time, that there are other ways to practice mindfulness, and small moments many times can be hugely beneficial.
I'm glad to hear you say that because a lot of people do feel like they do not have time to slow down and be mindful. So, what would you
Yeah.
say to someone who looks at mindfulness and maybe hears us talking about this and thinks that's like that's a luxury I don't have time for?
Yeah. Yeah. So I say it's not about having another item on our to-do list. It's not
Mm.
about doing as much as a way of being. And it's a way of being and approaching life. It's it's being aware of what's most important in our life. And when we look at it, if we look at it as yet another thing on our to-do list, I mean, I could say from personal experience, chances are I'm just going to push it away because my plate is so full. But when we look at it as a deep act of self-care and one that allows us to not only show up more fully for ourselves in the moments of our life, but for the lives of others, for the moments with our children, for the moments with our friends, our pets. It really helps us to live a more vivid and meaningful life. So it's it's more a way of being in relation to whatever comes our way and choosing how to live more fully in the present moment.
I like that.
Yeah.
Now, we were talking a little bit about just the high pressure environment of a law firm. And I know there are lots of high achieving careers out there and lots of high pressure environments. Do you think burnout is avoidable, or is it just kind of part of the deal unless we radically change how we approach success?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So burnout doesn't have to be part of the deal.
Mm.
Like I was definitely headed down that road. And if I didn't choose to practice better self-care, that was the direction I was headed. And so it's this awareness piece that we all have within us, but we don't necessarily give ourselves permission to rest. So we can, I was able to continue when when I learned mindfulness. I was at the halfway section of my 20-year career. I was about 10 years in, and I think I was very, very close to burnout, but I was able to find a lot of fulfillment in the work that I did and to find more balance. So I don't think like it's necessarily part of the formula, but if we don't practice better self-care, if we don't identify how we get in our own way and actually create more suffering for ourselves, then I think burnout can be inevitable, but it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
But we have to be willing to slow down and to identify what isn't serving us. When we fall, we call this autopilot mode, when we're just in constant doing and we feel like we can't afford to slow down. Well, then we're going to be more prone to burnout. So it's just, can we recognize how we are and how can we support ourselves to work maybe in an industry that's really stressful, but we can find ways to better manage it with mindfulness.
Yeah. I know we've kind of talked around this a little bit, but I want to ask it more directly. What role does self-compassion play in mindfulness?
Yeah. So self-compassion gets a bad rap sometimes, especially I know having worked in the legal field where we have to be, our client's most zealous advocate, and we can't show a soft side or we're going to be perceived as weak or incompetent. To show self-compassion, there's a bit of a stigma, but self-compassion actually makes us stronger and more resilient. And it involves sort of going against the grain, so to speak, of what many of us are conditioned to do. And that is we often stuff down or hide what doesn't feel good. We turn our, we push it away or we look the other way. We don't want to face it. We don't want to deal with it because it doesn't feel good. So with mindful self-compassion, we actually hold space for it, and we hold space for it in a gentle way. We validate what's here, whether it's anxiousness, sadness, grief, whatever is here and is in some way challenging. We validate it. We allow it to be here, and we acknowledge that to you know so, life can be really challenging, and it's part of common humanity to experience suffering in our lifetime. So to know that we're not alone, to that's part of the self-compassion practice, to validate it, to know that we're not alone, that it's part of the human condition. And then the third piece of mindful self-compassion is, how can we support ourselves to be with what is? What can we offer ourselves? What can we, what gesture? Maybe that means just placing our palms of our hands on our heart, or, getting back to what Rose said, my great grandmother used to like hold my face in the palms of her hands. What gesture, or what phrases, what can we tell ourselves? What can we offer ourselves as if we were our own good friend? If you had a good friend, or your child were hurting in some way, what would they want to hear from us? And can we extend that to ourselves? So that allows us to really heal and to grow and to become stronger. But it takes a lot of courage, and it's not often what we're encouraged to do. So I love self-compassion practices, and I think that they do make us stronger.
Yeah. I I think it also goes back, we were talking earlier about kind of the what Joey was saying, and just the, I use sometimes that feeling inside of yourself of like, this is how it is, this is how it's always going to be, and
Yeah.
having that compassion for yourself, and going, well, let's not put it into those terms. Let's think about it a little bit differently, and how could I help myself through some of what I'm going through, and how could I help myself just give myself that grace and that space to kind of figure this out in a little bit of a different way. So, um,
Yeah, and also noticing how you're relating to that. When we're not
mhm,
feeling good, when we're suffering with depression, or we're feeling anxious, and we're not sure exactly why, we give ourselves a hard time. We're really, really tough on ourselves. We call this the second arrow. I don't know if you've heard of this before, but I the first arrow is the pain, the suffering
mm,
that we're having, and it hurts. And then we shoot ourselves with the second arrow. We give ourselves a hard time for feeling depressed, or for
mm,
feeling anxiety. So again, it comes to this awareness piece. Like, can we notice how we're relating to what it is we're experiencing? And rather than giving ourselves a hard time, can we hold it with more compassion, with more kindness, with more openness, as opposed to trying to force it away, or in some way berating ourselves for the experience, because it's what's, like, as you said, it's what's here. So, like, can we support ourselves to be with what is?
yeah. You talked about your kids a little bit, and I know that you've said that your kids kind of remind you to slow down. Can you
Yeah.
share a recent moment where that showed up for you?
Yeah. So one that came up not too long ago. So I know we talked before we went on air, and one of your children, they get up early, and so my youngest son gets up super early, and he has, my mother-in-law calls him the sleepless wonder, and he could go to bed really late, and I hold a really long hours. I get up at like 4:30 in the morning, so by the time bedtime rolls around, I find myself getting a little impatient, like just
Mm,
wanting them to go to sleep so I can get more and more done. And it's great to see that, because it's, again, like falling into this autopilot, like this doing mode, and appreciating that he still wants to be with, like, at nighttime when we're reading books, or we're watching a show together, rather than rushing to get like the whole bedtime routine over with so I can go on to the next thing, that I need to do or get done. Can I really savor? Can I really take in this moment, whether it's just sort of cuddling, or laughing, listening to him laugh, his giggles, taking in his room, and just being together. So it reminds me, it teaches me just how much we can miss out when
mhm.
we're thinking, when we're caught up on the next thing that has to get done, or we're, devices. I don't know if some of us as parents, we take our phones in with us when we're putting children to bed, or whatever it is we're doing, that we're not truly present. So being around my kids is a constant reminder of or a way to question myself, am I truly showing up? Am I truly present for this moment?
Yeah, it can be really tempting to take your phone with you or scroll through Instagram. Well, and
Yeah.
so on the opposite side of that also, like my 18-year-old and I, we send each other Instagram reels. We could be sitting next to each other on the couch and just scrolling our own feeds and
Yeah.
sending Instagram
Yep.
reels back and forth. So it can be a source of connection, but at the same time, like you got to know when to put it down and when to really focus on that
Yeah.
present moment and
Right.
find that balance for yourself and your kids. My youngest doesn't have a phone. He's 11, and our rules are different. I know some of his friends are starting to get phones, and I'm just like, we're gonna hold off. We're gonna hold
Oh,
off a
you're
little bit
good. You're
longer.
good. The peer pressure
It
is
is.
real. The parental peer
It
pressure and the
is.
pressure you get from your kids, it's real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It cracks me up whenever he's like, oh, so and so has a phone. So and so has a phone. I'm like, great. Do you remember my number so you can call me from their phones if there's an emergency? Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Oof. Good move
They
on
don't
your
like
part.
that.
I was gonna say, I'm sure he loves you for it, but
Yeah.
from a parent standpoint, I admire that.
Yeah, it's tough. But it's tough to stay off of your own phone also. Like there's
It is.
especially
It
if you
is.
have like I've got email, I've got Teams, I've got all my work stuff on my phone and I've only
Yeah.
got the one phone, you know. So that
Right.
stuff just
Right.
pops up constantly. It can be really difficult.
Yeah.
If someone is listening today and is new to mindfulness, maybe they haven't heard of mindfulness before or they've never really considered it for themselves, where would you recommend they start?
So I have a website that has a host of resources, whether you want to read an article, if you want to experiment practicing a short guided meditation, whether it's an audio recording or a video recording, you can visit my website. It's just Courtney Schulnick mindfulness.com. And that's a really nice way at your own pace to explore mindfulness and actually get a taste of the fruits of the practice. I also offer weekly drop-in sessions. They're free. You can find them if you go onto my website page under events. You'll see a calendar. It's usually like for the whole right now, the whole month of May or most of May should be on there. So there there are options for free ways to drop in and actually practice in community. And then there are so many different apps like Calm, Headspace, Insight Timer. I know they have practices that are as short as 3 minutes and just baby steps, just, even a minute of just feeling the body breathing. And over time, the more and more you practice, the more you find that, maybe you can add on another minute and another minute. So really being gentle with yourself, not throwing yourself into like, not drowning yourself in mindfulness, but just dipping your toe in the waters and seeing how it lands for you.
Yeah, just trying to
Yeah.
find what works for you. And it's
Yeah. And I will also add, I'm super active on LinkedIn.
hmm,
I have different themes each week. So if you're looking to learn about certain attitudes that we can cultivate with mindfulness or different offerings that I have, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I think that's probably another great, not probably, it is a great way to see like sort of what is happening this week
hmm,
and ways you can support yourself with mindfulness.
yeah. White Mark would like to know, what is your favorite poem?
So I cheated because you let me know ahead of
Yep.
time that this would be a question. It's often a question that comes up, and I wanted to pull out the poem without just telling you the name of it, so I could actually read it and share it with everybody. So the poem is by Rumi. It's called "The Guest House," and it goes like this: This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So that's The Guest House by Rumi. And I will add that I was on a meditation retreat with John Kabat-Zinn this past year, and at the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York. And he reads this poem. I've been on retreats with him in the past, and he reads this poem every year. And he changes the second verse. It says this being human is a guest house, every morning a new arrival. He says every moment a new arrival. And so basically the idea that, rather than shutting the door and fighting what doesn't feel pleasant, that we invite in the good, the bad, the ugly, and we can be really gentle with it, rather than, when we fight our experience, when we fight our emotions, we fight situations, we actually can stir up more agitation in the body and the mind. So this just feels more welcoming, and it's really supportive. So I often read it when I notice challenging emotions or events in my life. It allows more space for what's here to just be here.
Yeah, that's a beautiful poem.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. It's one of my favorites, and we share it in the MBSR as well. So it's hopefully everyone else finds it supportive.
Yeah. What is your favorite life hack?
So my favorite life hack, I would say, in terms of mindfulness, one of my favorite hacks to help me find more ease if I'm noticing that the nervous system is activated and I'm feeling anxious or nervousness, that the breath can be really soothing. And just taking 3 relaxing sighs, whether, even before coming on the podcast, there was a little bit of nervousness. So just 3 relaxing sighs. Scientific research shows that it can have a physiological effect, that it can calm both the body and the mind. And a hack, getting into my day-to-day life, being a mom of 3 active boys and a husband with hearty appetites, I find myself in the kitchen a lot, whether that's preparing meals or cleaning dishes. And something that has been a great hack and offered me some ease is creating their egg cups. So you take maybe you did this before, but you have a muffin pan, and you can use egg whites, you can use regular eggs, and it's basically like an omelet. So you can add as much or as little as you want, but you mix it in a bowl. And my kids usually like some type of protein, vegetable, cheese, and you just pour it into the different muffin cups and bake it. Bakes really fast. And then I stick them in the refrigerator, and they're a great go-to if I'm running around in the morning. I don't have time to make something for myself or the kids, we're just sort of running around. That's a great hack, and it saves me a lot of time in the kitchen, and it's something that the whole family, all 5 of us, like. So rather than making like 5 different dishes, it's something that we can all enjoy together.
Yeah, I love that. I haven't done that in a long time because my oldest no longer likes eggs, so he's not that much of a fan of egg cups, but whenever he was little, we had chickens, and boy did we have too many eggs all the time. So I made all kinds of different things with eggs, and that was one of my favorite ones because it was like, okay, this row of 4 is going to be for mom. Like, I'm going to put on him what I want. Here's your row of 4. You pick what you want. Here's your row of 4. You pick what you want. And like, everyone just makes it up for themselves, and then you bake them all at the same time, and then you pull them out and you put them in the fridge. Or we even froze some of them at one point. I love that. It's fantastic.
I didn't think you do that. Yeah, you have like labels, like this is so and so's row. This is so. Yeah.
Yep.
We haven't so far. Everybody likes eggs, and it's easy, it's quick, and it's tasty. So checks all the boxes.
My theory is
Yeah.
because we had chickens and I made so many things with eggs, like I'd make a frittata like every Saturday,
That
every
was my
week.
go-to.
Yeah, we were
I
having
cook
so
so
many
much
egg
during
things.
there's pictures of me, multiple pictures during during the pandemic because, well, eggs were a lot cheaper than they are
Yeah.
now, but it was easy. You could make multiple pans and everybody liked it. So we ate a lot of frittatas during the pandemic
Hmm.
and yeah, yeah, I'd say that's a hack for the kitchen
Yeah,
that
yeah.
can be helpful.
You can also do it on a sheet pan. Like you can make, so I've done
Mm.
where you make a sheet pan pancake, and then you make a sheet pan of sausage, and you make a sheet pan of eggs, and
Oh,
then you stack them, and then you cut them, and then you put those
oh,
into each individual, like into a paper towel, and freeze them, and then you can reheat
oh
them.
my goodness.
So and it's way cheaper than getting like those Jimmy Dean's frozen breakfast sandwiches or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah.
It's way cheaper, and it's really not that much effort if you're doing it ahead of time, and it gets you a ton. If you're doing a sheet pan, it's a massive amount of these, and then you stick them in the freezer and
And
just microwave them
and
after.
your carbon footprint is better, so less
Yeah,
packaging.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
you may have to do a YouTube episode just on that.
Just done that. I'll have to make
Tutorial.
some. I haven't
Yeah,
done those in a while, but I could probably do that. Well, it
awesome.
is time for the magic moment. Let me get this magic wand going. So if you could wave a magic
Ooh.
wand and eliminate one common opinion or misconception surrounding mental illness, disabilities, or talking about mental health, what would it be?
Oh, I think I I may have referenced this indirectly earlier in the episode, but I think that we live in a society that encourages us to sort of grind it out.
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody's suffering with a mental health condition, I feel like they're often encouraged to just push through, to, somehow force themselves to be happy, to 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 move forward. And it's not that we don't want to promote happiness and we don't want to do things to help us to discern what's serving us and not, but forcing ourselves to be a certain way and not allowing space for ourselves to feel what's here inevitably comes back to visit, and it doesn't allow us to learn and to heal. So I feel like it comes from a good place, when people tell us if you're feeling down, like, come on, let's go out, or just push through it. It's coming from a good place, but I think in terms of self-care, sometimes scaling back, sometimes slowing down and turning inward and giving ourselves the space to be with what is, again, under the supervision, whether you're treating with a therapist or you're working with another mental health professional to do it skillfully, but to recognize how we're encouraged to just push through, and that doesn't always work for everybody. And in my experience, it certainly didn't. It came back. It intensified what I was experiencing. So yeah, the push through encouragement isn't necessarily the most skillful.
Very, very true. I also wish that would just go away because that's
Yeah.
that's one of those, you can't just smile and fake it till you make it. Doesn't always work.
Right. 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 And it's not always there are hormones and physical reasons why we're experiencing what we are. So it's
Hmm.
not like we can just snap our finger all the time and change it. So yeah.
Most
Yeah.
definitely. Well, that is kind of the end of the interview here. So I'm going to turn it over to you if there's anything we didn't talk about or any resources you want to throw out there. I am going to post your socials one more time. And folks, if you
Yeah.
do click through and connect with Courtney on any of these, I've got website, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, and links to her own podcast. So if you go through to any of those, make sure that you click on things, make sure you like things, leave a comment on something. That engagement is really what matters. So with that, Courtney, I will turn it over to you to just cover anything or plug anything you want to.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you mentioned the podcast. I have a podcast show called Conscious Corner with Annie and Courtney. Annie went on to take on a new job. She's a life coach, an executive life coach. So she is no longer able to participate in the podcast show. But I'm still moving forward. Every 2 weeks, I launch a new episode, and it tends to center predominantly on mindfulness, and I have different people. This week I'm having a guest she's going to be talking about menopause, perimenopause, and the ways in which mindfulness can support women in transition. And I have all different people who in some way, shape, or form weave mindfulness into their lives. So really interesting guests, really interesting stories and experiences. So if you want to dive in and learn more about mindfulness in that way, that's another option, both on Spotify and YouTube. So I think you covered all bases. I didn't get a chance to tell you how much I love the colors.
Thank you.
My two favorite colors are purple and blue, and I'm just loving the vibe I get to stare at all this time. So thank you. It's been a real joy to be together for this episode. And I hope that in some way, even if there's just one person out there who I in some way helped or they feel supported, then that really fills my heart. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yeah, that's always the goal. I'll also say, if you were inspired by this today, or if you felt some connection to this, it is always a good idea to let folks know that you were feeling that connection. Like I said earlier, leave a comment, reach out privately also. Like, I know when I get an email that says, hey, you don't know how much what you said helped me, like, that makes my whole year. I'm not even joking. Like, one email will be enough to keep me going for a whole nother year, even whenever it gets really hard. So just like, if there's something that you connected with in this, feel free to reach out, go connect with Courtney, and make sure that you're letting her know how much of a difference she's making. Because I'm sure we at least touched one person here. So let's make sure that we're doing all the connection and everything. But Courtney, thank you so much for taking the time out for this conversation. I had a blast.
I did as well, Mama. Thank you so much for inviting me to be your guest. I really enjoyed our time together, and I think what you're offering the community, the world as a whole, is terrific. So keep up the great work. I appreciated this time so much.
Thank you. All right, folks, I am going to disconnect with Courtney offline. I will be right back. Don't go anywhere. Stick around.